I used to think the scar on my arm was just awkward, until it became evidence. My aunt mocked it like a party trick at the barbecue, but moments later, her colonel husband stood up as if he had seen a ghost. It was not his salute that froze my blood. It was the sentence he spoke next. Words only those who have lost someone in a war would understand. My name is Piper Davis, and for the last 4 years, I have existed mostly in the quiet spaces between noise. I learned how to be invisible. I learned how to wear long sleeves when the temperature outside hit 90 degrees. And I learned how to smile when people asked me what I did for a living without ever really telling them the truth. But today, invisibility was not an option. Today, I had to drive my beat-up sedan into the driveway of a house that cost more than I would make in 2 lifetimes, all because my Aunt Lorraine had something of mine, or rather, something of my father's. The cardboard box sat on the passenger seat beside me, vibrating slightly with the hum of the engine. Lorraine had called me 3 days ago, her voice dripping with that sugary, poisonous sweetness she had perfected over decades. She told me she was finally clearing out the attic and had found a box of my father's personal effects that she thought I should have. She made it sound like a favor, like she was granting me a benediction, but as I parked the car and looked at the box, I already knew the game. I had opened it 5 minutes ago in the gas station parking lot down the road. It was light, too light. My father had been a man of substance, a man who kept journals, who collected heavy brass compasses, who wrote letters on thick, bonded paper. The box Lorraine had handed over contained a few moth-eaten sweaters, a cracked mug, and a stack of generic holiday cards. The journals were missing. The letters were missing. The medals he had never worn but always kept in the bottom drawer were gone. She had gutted his history before handing me the carcass, and now I had to walk into her backyard and thank her for it. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of expensive charcoal and honey-glazed pork. It was the 4th of July weekend, or close enough to it that the suburbs were engaging in their ritualistic display of patriotism. Red, white, and blue bunting hung from the porch railings. It felt like a set design, perfect and hollow. I walked around the side of the house, clutching the strap of my bag like a weapon. The noise hit me first. Laughter, the clinking of glass, the low bass of classic rock playing from hidden speakers. There were about 30 people scattered across the lawn, holding sweating glasses of iced tea and white wine. Lorraine was holding court near the patio table. She looked immaculate, of course. She was wearing a white linen dress that would have stained if a normal person wore it, but dirt seemed to be afraid of Lorraine. She saw me before I could blend into the shadows. "Piper," she called out, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a glass shard. The conversation in the immediate vicinity died down. Heads turned. I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. The same sensation I used to get when we were patrolling a sector that was too quiet. I walked over, forcing my shoulders to relax. "Hello, Lorraine," I said. She stepped forward and offered me a cheek to kiss, pulling back before I could actually make contact. "You made it," she said, broadcasting her benevolence to the audience. "I was worried you would flake out again. We know how you like your privacy. I just have been busy with work," I said. Lorraine laughed, a tinkling, brittle sound. "Work. Right. The little first aid classes you teach. It is adorable that you keep yourself busy, sweetie." I did not correct her. I did not tell her that the Redfield Response Institute was not about first aid classes, or that I spent my days teaching erratic civilians how to stop arterial bleeding in under 60 seconds. I just nodded. "Grab a drink," Lorraine commanded, waving a hand toward the cooler, "and try to mingle. You look like you are at a funeral." I moved away from her, navigating the minefield of lawn furniture. I found a corner near the hydrangeas and stood there, hoping to ride out the mandatory hour before I could leave. The heat was oppressive. My long-sleeved denim shirt was sticking to my back, and the thick cuff on my left arm felt like a tourniquet. "So, you are the niece?" I turned. A man I did not recognize was standing there, holding a beer. He looked soft, the kind of softness that comes from 40 years of desk work and air conditioning. "Yes," I said. "Piper." He pointed his bottle at my arm. Not hot in that? It is 85 degrees out here. I am fine, I said. Lorraine appeared out of nowhere, materialized by the scent of potential drama. She slid her arm through the man's elbow. "Oh, do not mind Piper," she said, her eyes gleaming with malice. She has always been dramatic about her wardrobe. She likes the mystery. I tightened my grip on my water glass. I am not being dramatic. Lorraine. She leaned in, her voice lowering just enough to make everyone lean in with her. "Then show us," she said. The circle around us tightened. It was subtle. The way predators circle a straggler. The man with the beer looked confused. "Show us what?" he asked. "Her battle scar," Lorraine said, and the air in the backyard seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Piper thinks she needs to hide it from the world, like it is some great tragedy." I took a step back. "Stop it, Lorraine." She laughed again. But this time it was harder, sharper. "Oh, come on. We are all family here, or close enough. Tell them. Piper, tell them how you got it. Was it a training accident? Did you trip over a supply crate?" She looked around at the guests, inviting them into the joke. That is the thing with Piper. She wants everyone to think she is this hardened survivor, but we all know she probably just snagged herself on the edge of a soup can and milked it for the disability check. A ripple of laughter went through the group. It was nervous laughter, the herd signaling their obedience to the alpha. They did not know the truth, but they knew who signed the checks for the catering, so they laughed. I stood frozen. My left arm throbbed, a phantom ache radiating from the jagged, keloid tissue hidden beneath the denim. The scar ran from my wrist to my elbow, a map of heat and wreckage that I had spent 4 years trying to forget. Hearing her reduce it to a punchline felt like being yanked back into that moment all over again. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her to go to hell, to scream. But my throat had closed up. The shame was hot and suffocating. That is enough. The voice did not come from the circle. It came from the grill. The laughter cut off instantly. Colonel Grant Weller turned around. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with hair that was graying at the temples in a way that looked distinguished rather than aged. He was wearing an apron over his polo shirt, holding a pair of metal tongs. I had only met him a handful of times. He was Lorraine's second husband, a man who usually stood in the background, nodding silently while she spun her stories. He was not nodding now. He set the tongs down on the side of the grill with a deliberate, metallic clatter. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked toward us. The crowd parted instinctively. He did not look at Lorraine. He did not look at the man with the beer. He looked straight at me. His eyes were blue, pale and intense, and for the first time, I saw something in them that was not boredom. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. He looked at my left arm. He did not look at it with disgust, and he did not look at it with the voyeuristic curiosity of the civilians. He looked at the fabric of my sleeve as if he could see the topography of the skin underneath. "Davis," he said. It was the first time he had ever called me by my last name. It was not a casual address. It was a summons. I straightened up, my spine locking into a posture I thought I had left behind in the desert. "Yes, sir, where were you?" he asked. His voice was low, but it carried a weight that made the rest of the party disappear. I swallowed. "Helmand Province. Sir, District 6. He shook his head slightly. "No, not the province. The specific outpost." I hesitated. That was not information usually shared at suburban barbecues. That was information buried in redacted files and nightmares. But the way he was looking at me left no room for evasion. "Forward Operating Base Keating," I said softly. "The triage unit." The colonel went very still. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. He looked at my face, searching for a lie, and then his gaze dropped back to my arm. 17 Bravo, he said. It was not a question. It was a code. A specific designation for a medical evacuation unit that had operated in the worst valley on Earth during the worst fighting season of the decade. A unit that had taken 80% casualties in a single night. I felt the blood drain from my face. "How do you know that designation?" He did not answer me. He just stood there, and the mask of the suburban husband fell away completely. The man standing in front of me was not Lorraine's accessory. He was an officer who was seeing a soldier. Lorraine, sensing her control slipping, tried to laugh. "Grant, honey, what are you doing? You are scaring the poor girl." Grant ignored her. He did not even blink. He took one step closer to me, invading my personal space in a way that should have been threatening, but instead felt like a shield being raised. He knew. He looked at the sleeve covering my arm, and I knew that he saw the burnt flesh, the missing muscle, and the history written in scar tissue. He did not see a soup can accident. He saw the worst night of my life, and then he took a breath and prepared to say something that would burn this entire barbecue to the ground. The smell of the charcoal grill vanished instantly, replaced by the scent of diesel fuel, pulverized concrete, and the copper tang of old blood. The backyard in the suburbs dissolved. The manicured grass turned into the gray, powdery dust of a supply route that had not seen rain in 6 months. I was not standing in a pair of sensible sandals anymore. I was wearing 40 pounds of ceramic plating and Kevlar, and my boots were sliding in the mud that was not made of water. It was 2014. A Tuesday night that felt exactly like every other Tuesday night until the world exploded. We were running a standard medical escort mission, moving 3 transport trucks between outposts. The intel had been clean, the road had been swept, but war does not care about schedules or safety reports. The blast had not sounded like an explosion. It had sounded like the earth itself cracking open, a dull, concussive thud that I felt in my teeth before I heard it with my ears. Then came the screech of metal twisting against physics, the sound of a 10-ton vehicle being tossed like a toy. I was in the second vehicle. We slammed to a halt, the seatbelts locking hard enough to bruise bone. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the shouting. But my body moved on autopilot. Muscle memory took over. I kicked the door open and rolled out into the heat. It was 100 degrees at midnight, a suffocating, dry heat that sucked the moisture right out of your eyes. The lead vehicle was on its side, engulfed in flames that licked up toward the black sky like hungry tongues. The air was thick with smoke, so dense you could taste the burning rubber and plastic. I stayed low, crawling through the dirt, my medical bag dragging heavy against my hip. Tracers were flying overhead, green and red lines stitching the darkness. But I did not look at them. A medic does not look at the fight. A medic looks for the fallen. I reached the wreck. The heat was intense enough to singe the hair on my arms. I found the driver first. He was gone, killed on impact. I checked the pulse, confirmed the silence, and moved on. The brutal arithmetic of triage required me to be cold. You do not treat the dead. You save the salvageable. That was when I saw him. Staff Sergeant Nolan Price was pinned in the passenger seat. The crushing weight of the dashboard had collapsed onto his legs, trapping him in a prison of twisted steel. The fire was starting to eat its way into the cab. Crawling across the upholstery, Nolan was awake. He was 24 years old, with a face that still held the softness of youth despite the grit and the grime. He was not screaming. That was the thing that haunted me more than the noise. He was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. His eyes were wide, reflecting the flames. But he was not panicking. He was looking at me like I had just walked into a room to ask him a question. I scrambled up the side of the wreck, the metal searing my palms through my tactical gloves. I reached in, grabbing his vest, trying to find leverage. "Get me out. Piper," he said. His voice was conversational. "Steady. I am trying. Nolan, I am trying." I braced my boots against the door frame and pulled. I pulled until I felt the fibers of my own muscles tearing. He did not budge. The metal was cooling around him, contracting, locking him in. The fire surged. A wave of heat rolled over us, stealing the oxygen from my lungs. The sleeve of my uniform caught on a jagged piece of the doorframe, tearing open, exposing the skin of my left forearm. I reached deeper, trying to find a release latch, trying to find anything. My arm pressed against the superheated metal of the door. I smelled my own skin burning before I felt the pain. It was a sharp, clarifying agony, white-hot and absolute, but I did not pull back. I could not pull back. My hand was gripping his shoulder. And if I let go, he was alone. I was screaming then, screaming for a pry bar, screaming for help. But the firefight outside was too loud. No one could hear me. It was just me, the fire, and Nolan. He looked at my arm, watching the skin blister and char against the metal. He saw the pain on my face that I was trying to hide. "Piper, stop," he said. I ignored him. I pulled harder. The skin on my forearm was fusing to the truck, but I did not care. I was a medic. My job was to cheat death. I was not going to let it win this time. Nolan reached up with his free hand. His gloves were torn, his fingers covered in soot. He grabbed my wrist, the very wrist that was currently burning, and he squeezed. He did not squeeze to hurt me. He squeezed to make me look at him. "Go," he said. "No." I gritted out, tears streaming down my face, evaporating instantly in the heat. "You have to go. Piper, it is done." The flames were licking at his boots now. The heat was unbearable. My vision was tunneling. He pulled me closer. Just for a second. His eyes were clear, terrifyingly blue amidst the orange chaos. He knew. He knew he was not going home to Kentucky. He knew he was not going to see his dog or fix up that old car he talked about in the mess hall. "Tell him," Nolan whispered, his voice rough with smoke. "Tell who?" I choked out. "Tell the colonel," he said. Tell him I was not afraid. It was not a message for his mother. It was not a message for a wife. It was a message for a commanding officer. Tell him I was not afraid. The fuel tank ruptured. A wall of force hit me, knocking me backward off the wreck. I fell hard onto the dirt, rolling, my arms screaming in agony. I tried to get up, tried to run back, but a pair of hands grabbed my vest and dragged me away. It was one of the gunners. Pulling me to cover, I fought him. I kicked and screamed, watching the cab disappear into a fireball. I watched Nolan disappear. The scar on my arm was not just a burn. It was the physical imprint of the last thing I touched before I failed him. It was the shape of the truck door that kept him from me. It was the heat of the fire that took him. When I came home 6 months later, I was hollowed out. They tried to give me a medal for dragging the gunner to safety later that night. I threw it in a drawer and never looked at it. Reporters called, wanting the human interest story of the female medic in the line of fire. I hung up on them. They wanted a hero. I was just a witness to a massacre. I drifted for a year, floating through jobs I did not care about, living in apartments I did not decorate. I eventually landed at the Redfield Response Institute. It was a sterile, safe place. I taught corporate employees how to use defibrillators. I taught soccer moms how to apply pressure to a wound. I was good at it. I was efficient. I could talk about blood loss and shock without blinking. I could demonstrate a tourniquet application in 15 seconds flat. My students called me intense. My boss called me an asset. They did not know that every time I demonstrated how to check a pulse, I felt the phantom sensation of Nolan's wrist under my fingers. I wore long sleeves, always, cotton in the summer, wool in the winter. I covered the scar because I could not bear the questions. Civilians asked about it with a morbid curiosity, like it was a shark bite or a motorcycle accident. They wanted a cool story. They did not want to hear about the smell of burning hair or the sound of a 24-year-old boy accepting his death with the grace of a saint. The scar was my ledger. It was the record of the debt I owed and could never repay. I woke up at 3 a.m, 3 nights a week, sweating and gasping, clawing at my own arm as if I could peel the memory off my skin. But I never told anyone, not the therapist the VA suggested, not the few friends I had left, and certainly not my family, who thought my time overseas was just a phase I went through before settling down. Until today. Until Lorraine made a joke about it. Until a man I thought was just a suburban husband looked at me and said the designation of my unit like it was a prayer. I blinked, and the desert vanished. The smell of burning diesel faded, replaced by the cloying scent of Lorraine's expensive perfume. I was back at the barbecue. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The colonel was still standing there, waiting. He had peeled back the layers of my camouflage with a single sentence, and now I was standing naked in front of him, carrying the weight of a ghost I had promised to keep safe. Lorraine's voice shattered the moment like a rock thrown through a stained glass window. "Oh, look at the two of them," she announced. Her voice pitched high enough to reach the neighbors. "Bonding over war stories. Isn't that sweet?" She clapped her hands together, a sharp, percussive sound that summoned the rest of the party closer. The circle of guests tightened again, their curiosity piqued by the tension radiating from the grill area. Lorraine moved between the colonel and me, physically breaking the line of sight, reclaiming her position as the director of this scene. "Come on, Piper," she said, gesturing with her wine glass. "Grant is obviously dying to know, and so is everyone else. Stop being such a martyr and just tell us. Show us the arm. We are all family here. There is no need to be so precious about it." I took a step back, my heels sinking into the soft grass. "No," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. "I am not doing this. Lorraine." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw my cousin Sarah look down at her shoes. I saw Uncle Bob take a long sip of his beer, refusing to make eye contact. They were uncomfortable. Yes, but they were also terrified of crossing Lorraine. In this ecosystem, it was safer to let the predator eat the straggler than to intervene. Lorraine sighed, a dramatic exhalation of disappointment. "See? This is what I mean. We ask a simple question. We try to show an interest in her life, and she acts like we are attacking her. It is rude. Piper, honestly, it is just rude. You disappear for years. You show up with half of your father's things missing, and then you refuse to answer a simple question from your own aunt?" The injustice of it rose in my throat like bile. She was twisting reality in real time, painting me as the aggressor while she picked at my scars. I looked around the faces of my relatives, looking for one ally, one person who would say that this was enough. I found nothing but averted gazes and polite, frozen smiles. "I am leaving," I said. I turned on my heel, clutching my bag. I did not care about the box of my father's things anymore. I just wanted to get to my car, lock the doors, and drive until I could not smell barbecue smoke anymore. I took 2 steps before a hand landed on my right shoulder. It was not a grab. It was not the forceful restraint of someone trying to stop a fight. It was heavy, warm, and firm. "Wait." I stopped. I looked back. Colonel Weller was standing there. He had bypassed Lorraine completely. He was not looking at her. He was looking at me, and his expression had shifted from recognition to something far more fragile. "Please," he said. It was the word that stopped me. Men like Colonel Weller, men with oak leaves and eagles on their collars, did not say please. They gave orders, but his voice cracked on the word. He stepped around Lorraine as if she were a piece of lawn furniture. He came to stand in front of me again. "Ignoring the 30 people watching us, may I?" he asked, gesturing vaguely to my left arm. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to cover up, but the look in his eyes paralyzed me. It was not curiosity. It was desperation. He looked like a man searching for water in a desert. I slowly unbuttoned the cuff of my denim shirt. My fingers felt clumsy and thick. I rolled the fabric up, exposing the wrist, then the forearm. The scar was ugly. There was no poetic way to describe it. It was a chaotic map of raised, shiny tissue, varying in color from angry red to dead white. It twisted around my arm where the skin had fused to the metal door of the truck. It looked like violence. Lorraine let out a small, theatrical gasp. "Oh, my God. Well, that is certainly vivid. You can see why she hides it. It looks like she spilled a fryer on herself." Colonel Weller did not hear her. He reached out, his hand hovering over the scar without touching it, tracing the air above the skin. He was trembling. I watched a single bead of sweat roll down his temple. "July 22nd. He whispered. I froze. The date hit me in the chest like a physical blow. 2014. He continued, his voice gaining strength, though his eyes remained fixed on the burn. "The Arghandab River Valley. Root copper. I stopped breathing. The background noise of the party, the music, the ice clinking, the distant traffic, dropped away to total silence. The guests were still watching, but the smirk was gone from Lorraine's face. She looked confused, her eyes darting between her husband and me. "How do you know that?" I whispered. My voice was barely audible. He looked up at me then. His eyes were rimmed with red, swimming with tears that he was fighting to hold back. He did not answer my question. Instead, he asked one of his own. "The fire," he said. "It came from the secondary fuel tank. You were in the second vehicle." "Yes." "You were the medic." "Yes." He took a breath, a shuddering intake of air that seemed to rattle his entire large frame. "And you tried to pull him out. That is what this is." He pointed to the scar. He did not point with disgust. He pointed with reverence. "It is the shape of the door frame." He said, "You held on while it burned you." Lorraine laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that grated on the silence. "Grant, what on earth are you talking about? You are acting like you were there. Stop being so dramatic. She is probably making half of this up." "Quiet. Lorraine?" The colonel's voice boomed across the yard. It was a command voice, a voice that had moved battalions and ordered airstrikes. Lorraine flinched as if she had been slapped. Her mouth snapped shut, her face draining of color. She had never, in 20 years of marriage, been spoken to like that in public. Grant Weller turned back to me. He straightened his spine. He brought his heels together. The movement was sharp, precise, and completely out of place in a suburban backyard. He raised his right hand. He saluted me. It was not a casual wave. It was a slow, formal salute, held with perfect rigidity. His fingers touched the edge of his eyebrow, his palm flat, his posture broadcasting a level of respect that usually accompanied a flag-draped coffin. I stood there, stunned, my arms still exposed, the scar gleaming in the afternoon sun. I felt a heat rise in my face, but it was not shame. For the first time in 4 years, the heat I felt wasn't the memory of the fire. It was the sudden, overwhelming weight of being seen. The relatives stood motionless, their drinks stalled halfway to their mouths. Their eyes moved from the colonel to me, and in that pause they realized they'd misread everything. Lorraine stood with her mouth slightly open, her hands clenched together in front of her, stripped of her power. She'd tried to turn me into a punchline, and her husband had just turned me into a monument. The colonel held the salute for a long count of 3, then dropped his hand with crisp finality to his side. He met my gaze, and the tears finally spilled over, tracing paths down cheeks that no longer carried any soot. "I know," he said, his voice thick with grief, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I know what he told you to say, Piper." I stared at him, my pulse loud in my ears. "I know who those last words belong to," he said, "and I know he kept his promise." 3 hours after I drove away from the barbecue, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat of my car. I was parked in the lot of a 24-hour grocery store, staring at the automatic doors sliding open and closed, unable to go home. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking and cold despite the summer heat. The number on the screen was local, but I did not recognize it. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I assumed it was Lorraine, calling to scream, to demand an apology, or to spin some new narrative where I had ruined her holiday. But curiosity, or perhaps a strange sense of inevitability, made me answer. "This is Piper," I said, my voice raspy. "Ms. Davis, it is Grant Weller." The voice was stripped of the command tone he had used in the backyard. It sounded tired. It sounded like a man who had been holding his breath for a decade. I did not say anything. I watched a woman push a cart full of soda cases toward her minivan. "I am at the coffee shop on 4th and Main, near the south gate of the base," he said. "It is quiet. Please, I will wait as long as it takes." I hung up without promising anything. My instinct was to start the car and drive in the opposite direction, to put state lines between me and the Weller family. I had spent years building walls to keep people like them out, but the image of his salute, That rigid, trembling display of respect in front of the people who mocked me kept playing in my mind. He had silenced the room for me. I owed him at least a cup of coffee. The coffee shop was a small, industrial place that catered mostly to personnel from the base. It smelled of roasted beans and floor cleaner. When I walked in, Colonel Weller was sitting in a booth in the back corner, far away from the windows. He was not wearing the apron anymore. He had changed into a plain button-down shirt, looking less like a high-ranking officer and more like a grandfather waiting for bad news. He stood up when he saw me. He did not offer a hand to shake, which I appreciated. He just gestured to the seat opposite him. "Thank you for coming," he said. I sat down. I did not order anything. I just put my hands on the table, clasping them together to stop the tremors. "Why?" I asked. It was the only word I could manage. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He slid it across the scratched wooden table. It moved slowly, like a chess piece. "Open it," he said. I hesitated. The velvet looked worn, the corners balding. I reached out and flipped the lid. Inside, pinned to the satin lining, was a unit crest. It was not a standard issue pin. It was the distinct insignia of the battalion I had been attached to. The specific crest of the infantry unit Nolan had belonged to, but this one was different. It had a small chip in the enamel on the left wing of the eagle. I stopped breathing. I knew this pin. I had seen it every day for 6 months attached to a tactical vest. He wore this on his gear. Weller said softly. He said it was his lucky charm because he found it in a surplus bin before he deployed. I looked up at him. "You kept his pin?" "I kept everything," Weller said. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. I read the incident report. "Piper. I read it 12 years ago. The official Army paperwork is dry. It talks about grid coordinates, time of engagement, and casualty figures. It mentioned a medic, Specialist Davis, who sustained second-degree burns while attempting to extract the casualty." He paused, looking at my arm, which was now hidden under my long sleeve again. "But reports do not tell you the story," he continued. "They do not tell you that the medic refused to leave. They do not tell you that the medic had to be physically dragged away by a gunner. I had to dig to find that out. I had to find the men who were in the other truck. I have known your name for 12 years. I just never knew you were Lorraine's niece until I saw the guest list for the barbecue today. I felt a chill go down my spine. You knew I was coming?" "I hoped," he said, "but I did not know for sure if it was you. Davis is a common name, but when I saw the scar I knew." He took a sip of his black coffee. His hand was steady now, but his eyes were haunted. "Why does it matter to you?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "I know he was your soldier. I know you lose men. God knows I lost patience. But why Nolan? Why him?" Weller looked out the window at the parking lot. A group of young soldiers walked by, laughing, wearing their uniforms with the arrogance of the immortal. "Lorraine thinks Nolan was just a promising NCO I took a liking to," he said quietly. "She thinks I am sentimental about the troops. She likes the image of the benevolent commander. It fits her narrative of who I am." He turned his gaze back to me, and the pain in his eyes was bottomless. Nolan was not just a soldier to me. His father was my best friend in basic training. When his father died in a drunk driving accident and his mother fell apart, Nolan was 16. He was angry. He was heading for jail. I did not just recruit him, Piper. I took him in. I stared at him. The pieces clicked into place, sharp and painful. "He lived in your house?" "For 2 years," Weller said. "I taught him how to drive a stick shift in the high school parking lot. I signed his report cards. I sat in the bleachers for his football games. I was the one who signed the waiver for him to enlist at 18 because he wanted to be like me." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Lorraine does not know that part. She does not know he lived in the guest room for 2 years before we were married. She does not know that the boy she calls some soldier was the closest thing I ever had to a son." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. The barbecue, the mockery, Lorraine's cruel jokes about my scar. It all took on a new, grotesque dimension. She had been mocking the injury I got trying to save the boy her husband loved like a son, and she had no idea. She would not understand. Weller said, answering the question I had not asked. Lorraine likes the parade uniform. She likes the medals. She cannot handle the mess. She cannot handle the fact that I sent the boy I raised to a place where he burned to death. If I told her the truth, she would make it about her. She would make his death a tragedy that happened to her. I could not let her touch that memory. He reached into his jacket pocket again. This time, he pulled out an envelope. It was standard military issue, slightly yellowed with age. The corners were bent. It had been carried in a pocket for a long time. There was no stamp, just a name scrawled on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. To the Colonel. My throat closed up. He wrote this the night before the convoy. Weller said, his squad leader found it in his locker back at the base. It came to me with his personal effects. He pushed the envelope across the table until it rested next to the velvet box. I have never opened it, he whispered. I looked at him, shocked. 12 years? I was a coward, he said simply. I could face enemy fire. I could send men into combat, but I could not bring myself to read his goodbye. I was afraid he would blame me. I was afraid he would say he was scared, and that it was my fault for letting him go. He looked at me, his expression pleading. But today you told me what he said. You told me he said he was not afraid. He pointed to the envelope. You were there. Piper, you were the last person to look him in the eye. You hold the other half of this story. I cannot read this alone. I do not have the strength. The coffee shop seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us and the piece of paper that sat between us like a loaded weapon. I reached out. My fingers brushed the paper. It felt dry and brittle. It felt like the dust of the desert. I remembered Nolan's face in the fire. I remembered the calm. I remembered the way he squeezed my wrist, the way he accepted his fate so I could live. He had not died cursing the man who sent him there. He had died sending a message of reassurance. I picked up the envelope. It weighed nothing, but it felt heavier than the medical bag I had dragged through the dirt. You want me to read it? I asked. I want us to know, he said. I did not bring it here to make you cry. Piper, I brought it so you could see. I brought it because you earned the right to know what he wanted to say. I slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope. The glue had dried out years ago. It popped open with a soft tear. I pulled out a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was messy, hurried, written by a young man sitting on a cot under a dim bulb, thinking about the man who had saved him from a life of nothing. I took a deep breath, looked at the Colonel, and began to read the first line. The apartment was quiet, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that usually followed a mortar attack. But this time, it was just the aftermath of a family gathering. I placed the velvet box with the unit crest on my coffee table, right next to the envelope Colonel Weller had given me. They sat there like religious artifacts, demanding reverence, but my eyes kept drifting to the other object in the room, the cardboard box Lorraine had given me. It sat on the floor, innocent and battered. I had been so angry earlier, so focused on the insult of the moth-eaten sweaters, that I had not looked closely at the container itself. I sat down on the rug and pulled the box toward me. It was a standard moving box, taped shut on the bottom. But as I ran my hand along the inside, my fingers caught on something. The cardboard bottom was not flat. There was a ridge, a slight separation where the flaps should have been flush. I emptied the contents, the ugly sweaters, the cracked mug, onto the floor. I turned the box over. The tape on the bottom was old, yellowed and peeling, but there was a second layer of clear packing tape over it. It looked fresh. I grabbed a utility knife from my kitchen drawer and sliced it open. There was a gap between the folded flaps. Someone had reached in, or perhaps shaken the box until the thinner, flatter items slid out. My father had been a meticulous archivist. He kept every letter I ever wrote him from basic training. He kept the printouts of the few emails I sent from overseas. He kept photographs. I remembered a specific manila envelope he used to keep in his desk, labeled Piper, Service. It had contained my enlistment papers, my award citations, and candid photos he had begged me to send him. That envelope was gone. I sat back on my heels, the cold realization washing over me at the barbecue. Lorraine had made a show of handing me the box, but before that, she had held on to it. She had possessed my history for weeks. She had not just thrown away the valuable things, she had curated what was left. She had stripped the box of anything that proved I was a competent soldier, leaving only the scraps that made me look like a drifter. But why steal the service records? Why take the photos? I turned back to the coffee table. The colonel's envelope was waiting. My hands were trembling again, but not from anger this time. I picked up Nolan Price's letter. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, the ink slightly faded. It was dated July 21st, 2014, the day before he died. Dear Colonel, it is hot here. Not the kind of hot we get in Kentucky where the air sits on you. This heat is angry. It wants to kill you before the enemy does. I read the first paragraph, my throat tightening. He wrote about the dust, about how the water always tasted like plastic. He wrote about missing the colonel's backyard, about wanting to fix the transmission on his truck when he got back. It was so painfully young. He was scared. He did not say I am terrified. But it was there in the way he described the silence at night, the way he admitted he slept with his boots on, and then, at the bottom of the page, there was a postscript, P.E.S. If you talk to my mom, tell her I am eating enough, and if things go bad, tell the new medic, Davis, that she is doing a good job. She thinks she has to be made of stone to keep us alive, but tell her I trust her hands more than I trust the armor. I put the letter down. A sob escaped my throat, a raw, ugly sound that echoed off the empty walls. He had seen me. All that time, when I thought I was just a function to them, a mechanic for their bodies. Nolan had seen me trying to be stone. Tell her I trust her hands. I looked at my left hand, the one with the scar. I had failed those hands. I grabbed my phone. It was past midnight, but I knew he would be awake. You do not sleep well when you carry ghosts. He answered on the second ring. Piper? Sir. I said, I read it. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the faint hum of a ceiling fan in the background. He was a good kid. Weller said softly, He trusted me. I whispered, He wrote that he trusted me. He did. Weller said, That is why he was not afraid. He knew you were there. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, the grief finally mixing with the suspicion that had been gnawing at me since I opened my father's box. Colonel, I said, my voice hardening, when Lorraine gave me my father's things, did you see her go through them? Weller hesitated. I saw her in the attic a few times last week. She said she was organizing. Why? Because things are missing. I said, specific things. Photos of me in uniform, my service records, the kind of things you would use if you wanted to prove someone was a hero, or if you wanted to build a story about them. Weller let out a heavy sigh. Lorraine loves attention. Piper, but she usually keeps her schemes to the country club gossip mill. What do you think she is doing? I do not know. I said, but she did not just mock me today for fun. She was testing the waters. She wanted to see if I would crack. We hung up a few minutes later, but I did not sleep. I sat in my kitchen, drinking cold water, watching the sun come up over the city skyline. The feeling of violation was physical, like ants crawling under my skin. At 8 o'clock in the morning, my laptop pinged with an email notification. It was from a producer at a local television station, Channel 8. The subject line read, Regarding your touching reunion at the Weller BBQ. My stomach dropped. I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Davis, my name is Jessica, and I am a segment producer for Morning Coffee with Kara. We heard about the incredibly emotional moment yesterday between you and Colonel Weller. It is such a powerful story. The veteran niece and the Colonel uncle, connected by a tragic loss. We would love to have you on the show to discuss your service, your recovery, and how family heals all wounds. I stared at the screen. Family heals all wounds. It was a sick joke, but it was the attachment that made my blood freeze. It was a photo of me. I was 23 years old in the picture, sitting on a stack of sandbags, my helmet off, a dust-caked smile on my face. I was holding a bottle of water, looking exhausted but alive. It was a candid shot my squad leader had taken and emailed to my father. It was a private moment, a glimpse of the girl I used to be before the fire. That photo had been in the manila envelope in my father's box. Lorraine had not just stolen it. She had scanned it. She had sent it to a TV producer. She was pitching me. She was pitching us. I understood the game instantly. Lorraine had been humiliated yesterday. The colonel had stripped her of her power in her own backyard. She needed to regain control of the narrative. She could not be the villain who mocked a veteran. She had to be the loving aunt who facilitated a healing reunion. She was selling my trauma to buy back her social standing. I could hear her voice in my head, spinning the tale to the producer. Oh, my poor niece. She is so shy, so damaged. But we are working through it together. I slammed the laptop shut. The anger that rose in me was cold and sharp. It was not the reactive anger of the barbecue. This was tactical. She wanted a show? She wanted to put me on camera and parade my scar for ratings? I picked up the phone. I did not call Lorraine. I did not call the colonel. I looked at the email again and found the number for the producer. Lorraine thought she was directing this play. She thought I was still the quiet girl who hid her arm and let the family speak for her. She forgot what I used to be. She forgot that before I was a victim, I was a soldier who walked into fire. If she wanted me on that stage, I would go, but I was not going to read her script. I dialed the producer. "Hello, this is Piper Davis," I said. "I received your email. I would be happy to come on the show. But I have one condition." The fluorescent lights of the conference room at the Redfield Response Institute hummed with a frequency that made my teeth ache. I sat on one side of the mahogany table. On the other side sat Marcus, the program director, and a woman I had only met twice, a representative from our largest corporate donor. The air in the room was sterile, scrubbed clean of anything human. It was the exact opposite of the chaotic, smoky reality I carried in my head. Marcus cleared his throat. Adjusting his glasses, he looked pained. "Piper, you know we value your expertise here." He started. His voice was practiced, the kind of voice used to deliver bad news without accepting liability. "The tactical medical training you provide is world-class. But we have a situation." He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a paused video. It was shaky. Vertical footage taken on a cell phone. I recognized the background immediately. It was Lorraine's backyard. The camera was focused on Colonel Weller standing at attention, saluting me. The caption overlaid on the video read, "Drama at the Weller BBQ. Hero or hoax?" It had 17,000 views. We received a call this morning from the board. The donor representative said, "She did not look pained. She looked annoyed. They are concerned about the optics. We run an institute based on stability and professional crisis management. This sort of viral emotional display, it raises questions about stability." I looked at her. "Stability?" I asked. "We cannot have our instructors becoming the center of a tabloid controversy." She said, "It distracts from the mission. We are hearing rumors that you are going on a morning talk show to discuss a family dispute involving the military." I felt a cold, familiar weight settle in my stomach. It was the same feeling I had when I came back from overseas and tried to explain to a hiring manager why I had a gap in my employment. They wanted the veteran status for their diversity quota, but they did not want the veteran reality. They wanted the hero without the scar. "I am not the one who posted this," I said, "but you are the one in it." Marcus said, "Look, Piper, just take a leave of absence. A few weeks. Let this blow over. If you go on TV, and this turns into a messy he said she said fight, it reflects poorly on the Institute." I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You are asking me to hide." I said, "We are asking you to be discreet," the woman corrected. I walked out. I did not argue. I did not try to explain that the instability they saw was actually the most honorable moment of my life since the war. There was no point. They were civilians protecting a bottom line. They would never understand that silence cost more than money. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Lorraine. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was the one who had likely encouraged the filming, or at least failed to stop it. And now she was calling me while I was being sidelined from my career. I answered. I did not say hello. "You are making a mistake," she said. "No greeting, just the attack. I am walking to my car." "Lorraine," I said, "I do not have time for this." "I heard about work," she said. Her voice dropped to that conspiratorial, sickly sweet tone she used when she was trying to manipulate an outcome. "News travels fast in this town. Piper, I know people on the board. I can smooth this over." I stopped walking. "You called them?" "I was doing damage control," she claimed. "Look, the video is out. People are talking. You look intense. Piper, you look unhinged, standing there with your sleeve rolled up, making my husband salute you. It looks staged." She let that sink in. She was rewriting history again. "But I can fix it," she continued. "Come on the show with me." We sit down with Kara. We explain that it was a misunderstanding, a moment of grief. You let me do the talking. I will frame it as us supporting you through your PTSD. You will look sympathetic. I will look supportive. The Institute will take you back because you are getting help. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. She wanted to turn my trauma into her redemption arc. She wanted to paint me as the broken soldier so she could be the saint who put me back together. "No," I said. "Piper, do not be stupid. You are going to look like a monster if you fight me on this. I am not fighting you." "Lorraine," I said, my voice dead calm, "I am done fighting you." I hung up. My hand was steady. For years, dealing with Lorraine had made me shake with frustration. But that was gone. The anger I felt now was cold. It was the clarifying anger of a soldier who finally identifies the target. I got into my car and sat there, the silence of the parking garage pressing in on me. My phone buzzed again. A text message. It was from a number I did not know. Area code 502, Kentucky. I opened it. "Ms. Davis, you do not know me. My name is Elena Price. I was Nolan's wife." My breath hitched. I stared at the name. Price. A second message appeared. "A friend sent me the clip from the barbecue. I saw the colonel salute. I saw your face." "I have not heard anyone say his unit name in 12 years. I typed back, my fingers feeling numb. "I am so sorry." The response was immediate. "Do not be. I know who you are. Nolan wrote to me about the new medic. He said you had hands that did not shake. I saw the video, and I saw the way you stood there. I know he was cared for. Do not let them lie about it." I put the phone down on the dashboard. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. This was not just about a stolen box or a petty aunt anymore. This was about Nolan. It was about Elena Price in Kentucky, watching a cell phone video of a barbecue in Illinois, looking for scraps of her dead husband's memory. Lorraine was treating this like a reality TV plot. The Institute was treating it like a PR crisis. But for us, for the colonel, for Elena, for me, it was blood. My phone chimed a third time. It was Colonel Weller. "Lorraine is telling the producers you are mentally unstable and that she is coming on the show to clarify the situation. She is going to bury the truth to save her reputation. If you do not tell it, she will tell it for you." I looked at the text from the colonel. Then I looked at the text from Elena Price. "Do not let them lie about it." I started the car. The engine roared to life, echoing in the concrete structure. I drove home, but I did not go inside to hide. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop and found the email from the producer. "Jessica." I hit reply. "Jessica, I will do the interview, but I have conditions. 1. No pre-interview coaching. I do not speak to Kara until the cameras are rolling. 2. No B-roll footage of war zones. No sad piano music. No dramatization. 3. Lorraine does not know I am coming until I walk onto the set. If you agree to this, I will give you the exclusive. If you try to manage me, I will walk out." I hit send. I did not prepare a speech. I did not look for talking points. I went to the coffee table and picked up the envelope Colonel Weller had given me. I took the letter out and placed it in the inside pocket of my blazer. That was all I needed. I was not going to the studio to defend my job. I was not going there to humiliate my aunt. I was going there to deliver a message that was 12 years overdue. I checked my appearance in the mirror. I looked tired. The circles under my eyes were dark. But my hands were steady. I rolled down my sleeves, buttoning the cuffs over the scar, not to hide it, but because I decided that when I revealed it, it would be on my terms, not theirs. I was ready. The television studio was colder than the morgue at the field hospital. It smelled of hairspray and ozone, a synthetic scent that coated the back of my throat. I sat in a chair that was designed to look comfortable, but was actually rigid, forcing me to sit upright. Across from me sat Kara Wynn. I knew Kara from billboards around the city. She was the queen of morning television. A woman with teeth so white they looked like ceramic tiles and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. I also knew, thanks to a quick search on my phone in the parking lot, that she and Lorraine served on the same charity board for the local art museum. This was not an interview. It was an intervention disguised as news. 10 minutes before airtime. The door to the green room had opened, and Lorraine had swept in. She was not wearing the aggressive red dress from the barbecue. She was wearing a soft, pastel cardigan and pearls. She looked like the grandmother on a cookie jar. "Oh, Piper." She had sighed, rushing over to smooth a stray hair on my forehead. "I am so glad you decided to be sensible." I spoke to Kara. "We are going to keep this light. We are going to talk about how hard it is for veterans to readjust, and how families, loving families, sometimes struggle to understand the intensity of your reactions. Just nod. Dear, let me handle the heavy lifting." I had let her touch my hair. I had let her believe she was the general of this operation. I had said nothing. Now, under the blinding studio lights, I watched Kara adjust her earpiece. The floor director counted down from 5. His fingers slashing the air. "Welcome back," Kara said, turning to camera 1 with a practiced tilt of her head. "We have a very special, very emotional segment for you this morning. A viral video has been circulating of a local family barbecue that took a dramatic turn. We are joined today by Piper Davis and her aunt, Lorraine Weller." The monitor to my left flickered to life. They played the clip. It was edited. They had cut the colonel's salute. They had cut his words about the fire. They only showed me standing there, sleeve rolled up, looking fierce and angry, while Lorraine looked on with a hand over her mouth in feigned shock. Kara turned to me, her expression shifting to one of pity. "Piper, it must be hard seeing that. We understand you have been struggling since you came back. We hear this outburst was triggered by a discussion about a training accident." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. Training accident. That was the narrative. Safe, sterile, and dismissive. Lorraine jumped in before I could breathe. "It was a difficult day. Kara, Piper has always been sensitive about the scar. It was a mishap with some equipment during a drill years ago, from what we understand. But you know how it is. Sometimes, when people come back, they attach a lot of emotion to these things. We just want her to know she does not have to shout to be heard." A large screen behind us began to scroll live comments from social media. I suspect they were supposed to be curated, but a few slipped through. "She looks unstable. Imagine ruining a family party over a scratch." Another soldier looking for a handout. The laughter from the barbecue echoed in my head. But this was worse. This was thousands of strangers laughing in real time. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands, resting on my knees, were perfectly still. Kara leaned forward, placing a manicured hand on my arm. "Piper, look at your aunt. She is here because she loves you. Do you think, maybe, you could tell her you are sorry for the disruption? We can start the healing right here." The studio went quiet. They were waiting for the money shot, the tearful apology, the submission. I looked at the camera. I did not look at the red light. I looked through the lens, imagining Elena Price sitting in her living room in Kentucky. It was not a training accident. I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the studio noise like a razor blade. Kara blinked. I am sorry? I turned to look at her. I did not pull away from her hand. I let her feel the tension in my arm. It was not a mishap with equipment, I said, enunciating every syllable. And it was not a drill. It was an improvised explosive device on root copper in the Arghandab River Valley. July 22nd, 2014. Lorraine made a noise in her throat, a sort of strangled warning. Piper, we do not need to get into the gritty details. I ignored her. I kept my eyes on the lens. I was the medic on duty. The vehicle in front of us was struck. The fuel tank ruptured. The temperature inside the cab reached over 1,000 degrees in seconds. The studio floor manager stopped moving. The person scrolling the social media comments froze, leaving a particularly nasty comment about my hair hanging on the screen. I was trying to extract a soldier. I continued. His name was Staff Sergeant Nolan Price. He was 24 years old. He was from Kentucky. He liked to fix cars and he had a wife named Elena. I heard Lorraine gasp. She had never heard the name. To her, he was just a prop in her husband's career. Kara looked at her producer off camera, her polished veneer cracking. Piper, that is very tragic. But the point of today is the truth. I said, my scar is the shape of the door frame that pinned him down. I burned for 3 minutes trying to pull him out. I failed. He burned to death while I held his hand. That is not a training accident. Kara, that is the price of the freedom you use to sell advertising slots. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. The live comments on the screen behind me had stopped scrolling, or maybe the operator was too stunned to update them. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. The movement was slow, deliberate. Lorraine flinched, as if I were pulling a weapon. I pulled out the envelope. This is a letter Nolan Price wrote the night before he died. I said. I held it up. The camera zoomed in instinctively. The yellowed paper, the faded ink, the grit of the desert still trapped in the fibers. He asked me to tell his commander that he was not afraid. I said, my voice wavering just slightly. Not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of the memory. He spent his last breath comforting the people he was leaving behind. He did not die so my aunt could use his memory to look like a philanthropist. And he did not die so I could sit here and apologize for having a scar. I looked at Lorraine. She was pale, her mouth slightly open, her pearls looking suddenly like a noose. She looked small. This is the only evidence that matters, I said to her, and then to the camera. And no one has the right to edit it. Kara Wynne opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at her cue cards, then at me, then at the monitor. There was no way to pivot back to the script. You cannot segue from a burning truck and a dead soldier's last letter to a commercial for laundry detergent. The floor director stood there, his arm half raised. Forgetting to cut to the break, I stood up. I did not wait for their permission. I placed the letter gently back into my pocket, buttoned my blazer, and looked at the camera one last time. My name is Piper Davis. I was a combat medic, and I am done apologizing for surviving. I walked off the set. As I passed the crew, a cameraman, a guy in his 20s with a headset around his neck, looked at me. He did not look annoyed. He looked like he wanted to salute, but was too afraid of getting fired. He just nodded, a sharp, singular motion. I pushed through the heavy soundproof doors and into the hallway. My phone, which I had left in my bag, was vibrating against the table. It was not a text. It was a notification from the news app. Breaking. Veteran silences. Morning show host with powerful tribute to fallen comrade. The clip was already online. It had been 3 minutes. I picked up the phone. The comments were flooding in, but the tone had shifted. The mockery was gone. The cruel jokes were buried under a landslide of flag emojis, crying faces, and stories from other soldiers. I walked out of the building into the bright morning sun. The air tasted like exhaust and city dust, but for the first time in 12 years, it felt clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, and let it out. I had lit the match. Now, I just had to watch the fire burn down the lies. My phone was vibrating so constantly it felt like a living thing on the passenger seat of my car. I had to pull over into a pharmacy parking lot just to make it stop moving. When I looked at the screen, I expected hate. I expected the internet to do what it always did, which was to tear apart anyone who dared to be ugly and real in high definition. I was wrong. The notifications were scrolling faster than I could read them. They were not from trolls. They were from verified accounts, from private numbers, from people with flags in their bios. I was a medic in Fallujah. One message read, "I know that look. Thank you for saying it. My brother died in the Arghandab." Said another, "He never came home. You made me feel like he matters." Then came a text from a number I did not recognize. But the area code was Kentucky. "This is Elena. I am crying. I am crying because for the first time in 12 years. Someone said his name on television without making it sound like a recruitment poster. "You did good. Piper, you did good." I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, letting the tears track hot lines down my face. I had spent so long thinking my scar was a wall between me and the world. But it turned out it was a bridge. Then the ringtone changed. It was the sharp, demanding trill assigned to Aunt Lorraine. I stared at it for a moment. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, but the soldier in me wanted to hear the enemy retreat. I swiped answer and put it on speaker. "You ungrateful, selfish little brat," Lorraine screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. Stripped of all its polished veneer, it was raw, panic-induced screeching. "Do you have any idea what you have done? My phone is ringing off the hook. The museum board is calling a meeting. You destroyed me. Piper, you went on national television and destroyed your own family." I leaned back in the seat, looking at the roof of the car. "I did not destroy the family. Lorraine," I said calmly, "I just told the truth. If the truth destroys you, that is a structural problem with your foundation, not mine." "I was trying to help you," she shrieked. "I was trying to give you a narrative people could swallow. And now? Now I look like a monster. You look like a person who got caught," I said, and hung up. I blocked the number. It was the easiest decision I had made all day. By the time I got back to my apartment, the dominoes were falling faster than I could count them. First, it was the Redfield Response Institute. Marcus called me, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "Piper," he said, "we just got a call from the corporate donor. They want to double their contribution. They are issuing a statement about standing with veterans and mental health advocacy. They want to know when you can come back to teach. They want to put your picture on the website." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Yesterday I was a liability. "Marcus, today I am a marketing asset. Tell them I will come back when I'm ready, and tell them my tuition rates for the corporate seminars just went up by 50%. I hung up on him. 2. Then came the news alert. I opened my laptop to see Kara Wynn standing in front of a generic newsroom background, looking solemn. She was issuing a formal apology. "I want to apologize to Piper Davis and the veteran community," Kara said, reading from a teleprompter with practiced remorse. The framing of today's segment was based on information provided to us by immediate family members who assured us they were acting in Miss Davis's best interest. We were misled regarding the nature of her injuries and her service. We regret the error. She threw Lorraine to the wolves without blinking. In the world of morning television, survival was the only loyalty, but the real blow came an hour later. A local investigative journalist, someone who had been digging into the city's charity circuit for years, posted a thread that went viral alongside my video. He had been looking for a hook, and I had just handed him the bait. The headline read, "The Cost of Caring: How Lorraine Weller Used Military Charities to Fund Her Social Ladder." The article detailed how Lorraine had hosted 5 galas in the last 3 years for veteran causes. It showed the financial breakdown. 80% of the proceeds went to administrative costs, catering, and event planning fees paid to companies owned by her friends. Only 20% ever made it to the soldiers. She had not been helping veterans. She had been using us as centerpieces for her parties. The internet, which had been supportive of me, turned predatory toward her. Her social media pages were flooded with demands for audits. The charity board she sat on issued a statement that she had stepped down effectively immediately. My cousin Sarah, the one who had looked at her shoes during the barbecue, added me to a new family group chat. The title was simply, "Family, no Lorraine. I am so sorry I did not say anything yesterday." Sarah wrote, "She has bullied us for years. We were just scared of being cut off. You were braver than all of us." I watched the messages roll in. Uncle Bob, Cousin Mike, even the relatives I barely knew. They were all apologizing, all claiming they had always known Lorraine was manipulative. It was classic herd behavior, shifting to the new alpha. But I did not care. I did not need their loyalty. I just needed their silence to end. That evening, as the sun was setting, my doorbell rang. I stiffened. If it was Lorraine, I was going to call the police. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was empty. I opened the door. There was no one there, but a small package sat on the welcome mat. It was wrapped in plain brown paper. I picked it up and brought it inside. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Colonel Weller. "I am staying at the officers' club tonight," he wrote. I packed a bag. I left her a note on the kitchen counter. I did not yell. I did not fight. I just wrote, "You cannot polish a lie until it becomes the truth. I am going to find a place where I can breathe." I stared at the message. The Colonel, a man who had followed orders his whole life, had finally given himself permission to go AWOL from a toxic marriage. I looked down at the package on my table. The return address was handwritten. It was from a town in Kentucky. I sliced the tape open with my thumb. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a photograph and a small, tarnished metal object. The photograph was of Nolan. He was not in uniform. He was wearing a t-shirt covered in grease. Leaning over the open hood of a '69 Mustang, laughing at the person holding the camera. He looked so alive it made my chest ache. I picked up the metal object. It was a wrench, a 10mm socket wrench, worn smooth by use. There was a note on stationery that smelled like lavender. Piper. Nolan lost this wrench 100 times. He used to say it was the only tool that mattered because it fit everything. He told me once that a good medic is like a good mechanic. They do not panic when the engine smokes. He wanted you to have something that fixes things. You are not carrying him alone anymore. We are carrying him with you. Elena. I held the wrench in my hand. It was cold and heavy. A solid piece of reality in a world that had felt like a hallucination for so long. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The heavy curtain of shame that I had worn for 12 years was gone. I felt light. I felt clean. I was not happy that my aunt was destroyed. I was not happy that my family was in chaos. But as I rubbed my thumb over the smooth steel of the wrench, I realized I was finally something I had not been since the explosion. I was free. The venue Colonel Weller chose was a private dining room in a steakhouse 3 towns over, far away from the prying eyes of the country club set and the local press. The room was small, paneled in dark wood, and lit by a low-hanging chandelier that cast long, unforgiving shadows across the white tablecloth. There were no cameras here. There was no studio audience to manipulate. There was just the 4 of us and the silence. I arrived first. Colonel Weller was already there, standing by the window, staring out at the parking lot. He looked older than he had on television. The uniform was gone, replaced by a gray suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, as if he had lost 10 pounds in 24 hours. We did not hug. We just nodded at each other, acknowledging the strange new alliance we had formed. Then the door opened, and Lorraine walked in. She was wearing a black dress and enough diamond jewelry to fund a small revolution. It was her armor. She had done her hair and makeup with surgical precision, but the cracks were visible. Her hands, usually so expressive and controlling, were trembling at her sides. She looked at me, then at her husband, and then her eyes landed on the 4th person sitting in the corner of the room, Mrs. Martha Price. I had never met Nolan's mother. The colonel had told me she fell apart after her husband died. that she had surrendered her son to the colonel's care because she could not battle her own demons. But the woman sitting in the high-backed leather chair did not look weak. She looked like she had been carved out of weathered oak. She was wearing a simple floral blouse that looked store-bought and sensible. She had no jewelry. Her hands were calloused. Lorraine hesitated. She did not know who this woman was. "Sit down." "Lorraine," the colonel said. His voice was not loud, but it had the finality of a gavel striking wood. Lorraine sat. She placed her clutch on the table, creating a small barricade between us. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Is this a lawyer? Because if you are planning to divorce me, Grant, you should know I have already spoken to—" "This is Nolan's mother." The colonel interrupted. Lorraine froze. Her mouth snapped shut. She looked at the woman across from her, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in my aunt's eyes. This was not a social rival or a charity donor. This was the source of the story she had tried to steal. Martha Price did not blink. She looked at Lorraine with a gaze that was flat and heavy. "I flew Mrs. Price in this afternoon," the colonel said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope, the same one I had shown to the world on live television. He placed it in the center of the table. "We are not here to eat," the colonel said, "and we are not here to negotiate a press release. We are here because you need to understand the weight of what you tried to carry." Lorraine straightened her spine, trying to summon the ghost of her usual arrogance. "I was trying to help," she said. Though her voice wavered, "I was trying to turn a tragedy into something positive, into a legacy. You all act like I committed a crime, but I was the one building the platform. I was the one making people care. You were making people pay," Martha Price said. Her voice was raspy, the voice of a woman who had smoked cheap cigarettes and cried too many tears in lonely rooms. "I saw the report, Mrs. Weller," Martha continued. "I saw how much money you raised in my son's name, and I saw how much of it went to your party planners." Lorraine flushed. "That is a misunderstanding. Administrative costs are standard in the nonprofit sector." Martha leaned forward. The wood of the table seemed to groan under the pressure of her elbows. "I am not here to talk about your accounting," Martha said. "I am here because I saw you on that screen. I saw you sitting next to the medic who held my boy when he died. And I saw you try to speak for her." Martha pointed a finger at the envelope. "The colonel read me that letter today," she said. "It took me 12 years to be ready to hear it. It took me 12 years to get sober enough to deserve to hear it. And you? You treated it like a prop for your morning show." Lorraine looked away, unable to hold the older woman's gaze. "I did not know about the letter. Grant never showed it to me, because I knew you would use it," the colonel said. The silence that followed was suffocating. The air conditioner hummed, but it did nothing to cool the heat in the room. Lorraine looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but the tears were not falling. "Why are you doing this, Piper? Do you enjoy this? Do you enjoy seeing me humiliated?" I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the desperate need in her face, the terrifying hunger to be important, to be seen. "I do not enjoy it. Lorraine," I said, "I just want it to stop." Lorraine let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She slumped back in her chair, the diamonds around her neck clinking softly. "You have always been the special one," she whispered. "Even with the scar, maybe especially with the scar, you had something real. You had a tragedy. You had a story." She looked down at her hands. "I have nothing," she confessed. Her voice was small, stripped of its pretense. "I just have the parties. I just have the house. I look at you, Piper, with your silence and your trauma, and I feel so small. I feel invisible. I thought if I could manage your story, if I could be the one to present it, then maybe some of that substance would rub off on me." It was a confession of pathetic, devastating honesty. She was not just greedy, she was hollow. She had tried to fill herself up with my pain because she had none of her own worth talking about. Martha Price looked at Lorraine. Her expression softened, just a fraction. It was not forgiveness, but it was pity. "You cannot buy a soul, Mrs. Weller," Martha said, "and you cannot steal grief. It is too heavy. It will crush you. Martha stood up. She smoothed down her floral blouse. I did not come here to forgive you, she said. I came here to protect his memory. My son was not a hero because you threw a gala. He was a hero because he did his job, and Piper did hers. She looked at the colonel. I am ready to go back to the hotel. Grant? The colonel nodded. He looked at his wife. I am not coming home tonight. Lorraine, he said, and I need you to understand the new rules of engagement. He placed his hands flat on the table. If you ever mention Piper to the press again, if you ever use my rank or Nolan's name to sell a ticket or solicit a donation, I will not just leave. I will go to the district attorney with everything I know about the foundation's finances. I will testify against you. Lorraine paled. You would send your wife to prison? I would send a criminal to prison, he said coldly. The wife I thought I had does not exist. He stood up to leave with Martha, but he paused and looked at me. Piper? I stayed seated. I have one more thing to finish. I said. The colonel and Martha walked out. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving me alone with Lorraine. She looked like a ruin. The facade had collapsed completely. She poured a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. Her hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it on the tablecloth. What do you want? Piper, she asked, her voice tired. You won. The world hates me. My husband is leaving. What else do you want to take? I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a weapon or a lawsuit. I pulled out a list I had written on a notepad. I want the rest of the box, I said. Lorraine looked confused. The box? The box of my father's things. I said, I know you kept the good parts. I know you have the photos of me in uniform. I know you have his journals where he wrote about being proud of me. I know you kept my service records because you thought you could use them later. I slid the list across the table. I want them back. Tonight. You are going to drive to your house. You are going to put everything you stole into a bag, and you are going to leave it on my porch. You are not going to knock. You are not going to ask to come in. Lorraine looked at the list. She nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. And one more thing, I said. I leaned forward. You are going to stop writing my life for me. You are going to stop telling people I'm broken so you can look like a healer. You are going to stop telling people I am shy so you can be the spokesperson. My scar is not your content. Lorraine closed her eyes. A single tear escaped, cutting a track through her foundation. I am sorry. Piper, she whispered. I looked at her. It was the first time she had said those words without a camera rolling or an audience watching. It might have even been true, but the thing about apologies is that they do not heal burns. They just acknowledge the fire. I stood up. I will expect the package by midnight, I said. I walked out of the restaurant. The night air was cool. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a moment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel, but they were not white-knuckled. They were relaxed. I had entered that room a victim of her manipulation. I left it as the owner of my own history. The distinct hum of a crowd of 500 people is a sound that usually makes my skin crawl. It sounds like static electricity. I stood backstage at the City Civic Center, watching the dust motes dance in the harsh glare of the stage lights. The banner above the podium read, Honoring Our Heroes, a Night of Resilience. It was the kind of event I had spent a decade avoiding. A frantic event organizer with a headset clipped to her belt clipboard rushed up to me. She looked stressed. Okay, Piper, you are up in 2 minutes, she said, tapping her watch. Remember what we discussed during the pre-check? Keep it emotional but uplifting. Focus on the healing aspect. If you can tear up a little when you mention the family support, the cameras love that. We want a moment that feels good. I looked at her. I am not an actress. I said, I am a medic. She blinked, clearly unused to people who did not want to be famous. Just do your best. Sweetie, she bustled away. I took a deep breath, adjusting the cuffs of my blazer. I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt underneath, but the jacket was still buttoned. Piper. The voice came from the shadows behind the velvet curtain. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. Lorraine. She stepped into the light. She looked different than she had at the restaurant. The desperation was still there, but she had plastered a layer of determination over it. She was holding a stack of index cards. "I know you are angry," she said, her voice a harsh whisper. "I know I messed up, but there are 3 news crews out there. Piper, this is the biggest platform you are ever going to get. Do not waste it on anger." She shoved the index cards toward me. "I wrote this for you," she said. "It is good. It talks about how the family struggled to understand your silence, but how love brought us back together. It paints you as a survivor and me as well. It just makes the whole thing less ugly. Please, read it. For your father's sake." She loves the family name. "Piper, do not drag it through the mud again." I looked at the cards. I looked at her manicured hands, which were shaking slightly. She was still trying to direct the movie of my life, even as the credits were rolling. I reached into my pocket, but I did not take her cards. I pulled out a folded piece of paper that I had found 2 nights ago, tucked inside the lining of my father's old leather journal. The journal she had returned to my porch in a garbage bag at midnight. "I do not need your speech, Lorraine," I said, "because I found the one Dad wrote." Lorraine froze. Her eyes darted to the paper in my hand. "What is that?" I unfolded it. The paper was crisp. "He wrote this a month before he died." I said, "He hid it in the lining because he knew you went through his desk. He knew you filtered his mail." I began to read, keeping my voice low so only she could hear. "My dearest Piper, I am writing this because I am a coward. I see the way Lorraine talks over you. I see the way she makes your service about her anxiety and your scars about her embarrassment. I should have stopped her years ago. I am sorry I let her manipulate us. I am sorry I let her convince you that your truth was too heavy for this family. You are the only honest thing in this house." I looked up. Lorraine's face had gone gray. She took a step back, hitting the heavy velvet curtain. "He never said that," she whispered. "He loved me. We were a team. He tolerated you." I said, "And he protected me the only way he could, by leaving the truth where he knew only I would find it." I folded the paper. "You wanted to protect the family name?" I asked. "You just lost the right to speak it. The stage manager signaled me. You are on. Ms. Davis." I walked past Lorraine. She stood there, paralyzed, the index cards slipping from her fingers and scattering on the dusty floor like dead leaves. She did not follow me. She could not. The script she had written for 40 years had just been burned. I walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was polite, the kind of applause people give when they are expecting a tragedy. I stood at the podium. I saw them all, the mayor, the donors, the press with their cameras aimed like rifles, and in the front row, I saw Martha Price and Elena. They were not clapping. They were nodding. I looked to my left. Colonel Weller walked out from the wings. He was not wearing his uniform. He was wearing a simple dark suit. He did not wave. He did not salute. He walked over to the podium and stood 2 feet behind me, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not there to steal the valor. He was there to guard the flank. I leaned into the microphone. "I was asked to come here today and give you a speech about healing." I said, my voice echoed in the vast hall. "I was asked to tell you that love conquers all and that scars are just bumps in the road." I paused. The room went silent, but that would be a lie, and I am done with lies. I reached up and unbuttoned my blazer. I took it off and draped it over the podium. Underneath, I was wearing a black t-shirt. My left arm was bare. The scar was there. Under the harsh stage lights, the twisted, keloid map of the burn, the shape of the truck door. It was purple and white and angry. A few people in the front row gasped. A camera shutter clicked rapidly. For 12 years, I hid this arm. I said, not because I was ashamed of what happened in the Arghandab Valley. I hid it because my family told me it made people uncomfortable. They told me it was ugly. They told me to cover it up so I would fit in at barbecues and garden parties. I looked directly at the camera with the red tally light. The worst wound I carried was not from the fire that killed Staff Sergeant Nolan Price. I said, the worst wound was the silence I was forced to keep by the people who claimed to love me. They treated my survival like a social inconvenience. They turned my trauma into a punchline because they could not handle the reality of war. I took a breath. The air in the room felt electric. This scar is not a tragedy, I said, my voice rising, filling the cavernous space. It is a receipt. It is the proof that when the world was burning, I reached in. It is the proof that I held on. It is the only thing I have left of a man who died so I could live. I looked back at the colonel. He nodded, his eyes bright. We do not need your pity, I said to the crowd, and we certainly do not need your polite applause. We need you to understand that you do not get to edit our stories to make them comfortable for your dinner tables. You do not get to polish our grief until it shines. I picked up my blazer. My name is Piper Davis. I am a combat medic, and this scar is the most beautiful thing I own. I walked away from the podium. For a second, there was total silence. Then, one person stood up. It was Martha Price. She stood up slowly, her joints stiff, and she began to clap. It was a slow, heavy rhythm. Then Elena stood up. Then a man in the third row, wearing a hat that said Vietnam Veteran, stood up. He slammed his cane on the floor and cheered. Then the whole room rose. It was not the polite applause of the beginning. It was a roar. It was a wave of sound that washed over the stage, drowning out the hum of the lights. It was messy and loud and real. I did not look back at the audience. I did not look for Lorraine in the wings. I knew she was gone, fleeing the scene of her own irrelevance. I looked at the colonel. He held out his hand. I took it. We walked off the stage together. 3 hours later, I was back in my apartment. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a quiet, bone-deep exhaustion. I made a cup of tea and walked to the living room window. The streetlights were humming outside. The city was asleep, unaware that the world had shifted on its axis for me. My phone was on the table. It was full of messages, interviews requests, offers from publishers. I ignored them all. I opened the window. The night air was cool, smelling of rain and asphalt. I looked down at my arm. In the moonlight, the scar looked silver. It looked like a river on a map. I ran my fingers over the ridges. It did not hurt anymore. The phantom heat was gone. I rolled my sleeve up past my elbow, exposing the entire length of the burn to the cool air. I left it there, resting on the sill, visible to anyone who might look up. I was not hiding. I was not performing. I was just Piper. And for the first time since I came home, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to share this journey with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more revenge dramas, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support makes all the difference.